got this warm cup of water next to me that I can drink from so that I don't mess up my voice. Because I was sick the last time I recorded and that sucked. So don't want to do that again. I'm recording this after the fact because of the holiday weekend. I was out of town with my family, and so I decided that I would just do some stuff on the road. So this piece and the next one that you're going to see was done in Procreate, and that's I usually do things in Clip Studio, but it was just going to work better for me if I just did it on my iPad. And it was a good practice for me to use a different software. But this was fun. Yeah, so I'm recording after the fact just because I was out of town and I couldn't bring audio equipment with me and narrate while I'm doing this. But yeah, so with this one I was wanting to do Samus Aran from Metroid. Big fan of Metroid, and I wanted to do Samus in her I think it's called the power suit. I don't remember if that's what it's called exactly, but I wanted to do an image of her in her suit, but kind of my take on it, because I had seen a few images of some fan art that people had done, and there were elements that they had incorporated, and I was like, ooh, that's good. I want to do that. So I decided that I would just go from imagination and try and remember things the best that I could, but also incorporate elements that I would like to see in it, because if you look at the images of Samus and like in game from Metroid Prime, or even, you know, art of Samus in her suit, it's kind of like disproportionate. It looks almost like alien, like the shoulders are really far apart and it's hard to tell like if it's human or not. And that's not necessarily like an issue that I take with it, but I did want to create something that felt more like representational of like her form, you know, because I mean she's built, but she's also, you know, a woman. She's a really, really tall woman. So I wanted to kind of convey that. And I was also incorporating some like, you know, interesting like dramatic lighting from down below, kind of giving that like Brinstar vibes. And I didn't want to go too far into things since I was going to be, you know, vacationing over the weekend. So I just decided to go with a simple background. And one thing that I hate about Procreate, I shouldn't say hate, that's that's a strong word, is what my family always says. But one thing that I don't really like about Procreate, and maybe it's just because of my iPad, because it was a refurbished iPad, but sometimes I'll get these like glitches on the touch screen, and I'll just get these stray brush strokes, and it's really annoying to me, and I have to go back and erase it. Sometimes it was on a different layer and I don't realize it. I'm like, damn, I gotta go back and fix that. And it's just so annoying. So yeah, I don't know, maybe I just need to wear my smudge glove more often, but it's super annoying. That was happening a lot with this piece. I don't know why. It was probably because I was on the road and just being mobile a lot. So I was, probably it was probably picking up, my pinky touching the touch screen, but whatever. What am I talking about? Nobody wants to hear about this, but then again, nobody's watching this, so it doesn't really matter. Oh, frick. Dropped my coaster. I'm sure it'll get easier, but recording things, like talking by myself, feels so weird to me. It feels so strange. But there are a few things that I do want to talk about, and I know it's good for me to be able to, practice this kind of thing and talk about my process out loud, and it is therapeutic for sure. So one thing that I wanted to share is a story from over the weekend, from the 4th of July. My family, my in-laws specifically, they do a fireworks show every year because my father-in-law owns a resort, like out in backcountry, next to a lake. So it's like a fishing resort. And every year he does this fireworks show, and they buy like really good high-end fireworks, and usually there isn't many hiccups that go on with it. It's typically, goes pretty well, and they're pretty cautious about it, even though there haven't been many mishaps with it, and they usually keep a bucket of water nearby in case anything goes wrong, because there's the boathouse that's like right next to the lake, and in the boathouse is a bunch of cans of gasoline. Now this is not going where you might think it's going. I'm just injecting that for stakes in the story. So they one of the packs of fireworks that they had, it was kind of a dud, and so a few times there was fireworks that would just kind of like putter out of the pack and just fall on the ground instead of launching into the air, and it would just explode, and it's really scary and really loud because it's just like we're all sitting like right next to it, but there was one that went off, and some of the sparks got into the boathouse and lit the garage door on fire, and it was raining like molten oil, and they didn't have a bucket of water, and so my brother-in-law just opened a water bottle and was just chucking it up because the garage door was up. He was just chucking it up at this molten like oil that was dropping down onto the ground. I'll attach a picture in here. It was insane. It could have made the whole place explode. It was so dangerous. But it was thrilling for sure. Made me appreciate the negligent behavior of American citizens on Independence Day. Something that I did want to talk about on a more serious note was hope. I have a tendency, I think, to put all of my eggs in one basket, I tend to get my hopes up about things a lot. I'll get very excited about a goal that I have, whether it's, getting fit or, displaying my art at a show or getting a certain job. And a lot of the time, it doesn't work out because there's so many things and so many factors that play into your everyday life. It's impossible to, get exactly what you're looking for and with your expectations of things and whatnot. And I had a bad habit there for a long time of kind of setting goals that were out of my control, especially when it came to social media and that sort of thing. Because I always wanted to be able to have a following, a big enough following where people could see my art. Not necessarily for like recognition or clout or anything like that, but I like being able to share my art with people. And I feel like if I'm not sharing my art with people, then what's the point? So I've set lofty goals for myself, and I can't control the actions of other people. And, it really kind of sputtered out, and that happened a few times, and I got really discouraged. It was really hard for me to bounce back from that. And there are also a couple of other personal things that happened that, got in the way of some of my other goals, poor decisions of people that I know and bad behavior from people that I know that affect me and my family or my wife. And it's really hard to not feel despair after that. It feels so backwards to say, but it's like if you have blissful hope, ignorant hope, then ironically 9 times out of 10 you will end up despairing. Because if you have expectations for something to happen and it doesn't happen, when you were hoping that it would, then you'll just be discouraged. But I heard this story recently. I can't remember who it was from, but I shared it with my wife about this Vietnam veteran who was a prisoner of war, a majority of the time that he was deployed in Vietnam. And he said that the people that he was with were often so hopeful that they wouldn't make it and they would die. And I'm assuming in that they would take their own lives. Because they would just give up hope, because they would say, okay, this next Christmas it's going to be over and we're going to go home. And that's it. You got to have faith that it's going to be over within the year or over within 2 years. And that would just keep going on and on and on. And they'd get so discouraged to the point where they just couldn't go on anymore. And this guy said that he came to the realization that it's not about blind hope. It's about having hope with a realistic expectation. He knew that the war was going to end. That was a fact. Eventually it was going to end. He didn't know when and he didn't know how, but he knew eventually it would be over. And keeping that in mind, not setting a time frame or setting an unrealistic expectation for himself, is what kept him alive, is what kept him sane and kept him pushing, even though all these other guys around him who were prisoners of war were frequently giving up because they would get to Christmas or the New Year and they wouldn't be released and they'd give up hope. But he always had hope with the realistic expectation that my circumstances are grim, they're dark, it's hard to see how I'll get out of this, but I do know for a fact that eventually things will get better. And that feels very ethereal, but it works like so well. Having that hope, that realistic hope, knowing that and realizing the reality of your circumstances, that's going to give you so much more motivation to keep pushing. Because even if it's just luck of the draw or something like that, most of the time when it comes to things like social media or building a business, things where you're gambling, like gambling on a career path or something like that, that takes a lot of motivation and guts, because you don't know how it's going to turn out. It's really the luck of the draw. It's playing Russian roulette. If you set the expectation for yourself that I don't know when I'll catch, quote unquote, the break, even though I don't really believe in the break, but that's for a completely different conversation. But when I catch a break, quote unquote, like, I don't know when that's going to happen, but I know eventually that's going to happen. And I need to be realistic about that. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen in 30 years. And you just don't know. But if you want it bad enough, then you keep pushing. And that hope gives you that motivation to keep, doing your best. So that's been on my mind a lot, and it's really helped me through some tough moments. And I hope that, even if one person listens to this, I hope that they know that that's more important than just setting unrealistic expectations for yourself. Realize where you're at and the reality of your situation. As dim and as grim as it might be, you can push through it and you can make it. And I don't feel like I have very much authority on the matter because I'm a pretty young dude and I'm kind of just starting out my career. This whole YouTube thing, I don't even know if it'll work out, but if I keep doing it, eventually things will pick up. And these things that I want to share with people will get to the people who need to hear them. So anyway, this piece was really fun to do. And I think I might do a few more characters from Metroid. I love, the idea of playing in the sandbox, playing in someone else's sandbox. It's fun, putting my spin on things, doing that sort of thing, fan art. If you want the brushes that I use, I have a link in the description to my Gumroad where you can buy my brushes for pretty cheap. I've spent years curating them and designing them to get the effects that I'm looking for, and hopefully you'll find those helpful. And yeah, go make art or something.